History Secrets.
The vision described in the book of Revelation presents one of the most intense and symbolic images in the entire biblical text. A battle that does not take place on earth, but in the heavens. A war invisible to human eyes, and, at the same time, deeply connected to the destiny of humanity. But what does this battle really mean? And who are the characters involved? To understand this scene, we need to enter the context of Revelation. Traditionally attributed to John of Patmos, the text is filled with symbolic visions. It does not describe events in a literal way, but through images loaded with meaning. And one of those images appears at a decisive moment. In Revelation chapter 12, verse 7, there it says that there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought along with his angels. This scene marks a rupture, a separation, a direct confrontation between opposing forces. On one side, Michael, a figure already known in ancient Jewish traditions, associated with protection, justice, and the defense of the people of God. On the other side, the dragon, identified in the text itself as the ancient serpent, the one called the devil and Satan. But what exactly is being described here? A literal battle between celestial beings, or a symbolic representation of something deeper? To understand this, we need to look beyond the surface. The figure of the dragon, in the apocalyptic context, carries multiple meanings. It represents opposition, deception, destructive force, but it can also symbolize systems, structures, or forces that oppose the divine order. Michael, in turn, appears as the one who confronts, who resists, who maintains balance in the face of chaos. This confrontation is not presented as balanced. The text states that the dragon did not prevail, and that there was no longer a place for him in heaven. This suggests displacement, an expulsion, a loss of position. But here an important question arises. If the dragon is expelled from heaven, where does he go? The text itself answers, he is cast down to the earth, and with him, his angels. This completely changes the dynamic of the narrative. Because the battle does not end, it shifts. And perhaps this has profound implications. Some traditions interpret this passage as a primordial event, something that occurred before human history, a kind of initial fall. Others suggest it is an eschatological event, related to the end times. And there are also symbolic interpretations, which see in this battle a reflection of internal conflicts between awareness and illusion, between truth and deception. None of these readings can be easily dismissed. Revelation itself does not present itself as a linear account, but as a series of interconnected visions, and this opens space for multiple layers of interpretation. But there is a detail that often goes unnoticed. The text does not describe only the battle. It also describes a voice that proclaims something after the conflict, a declaration of victory, an announcement that the accuser has been defeated. This suggests that the battle is not only physical or symbolic, but also judicial, a kind of judgment where accusations are annulled and authority is redefined. This leads us to an important theological dimension, the idea of accusation, of guilt, of judgment, and of liberation. But who is this accuser, and how does he act? In some ancient Jewish traditions, we find similar figures, beings who accuse, who test, who question. But in Revelation, this figure takes on a broader role. He does not only accuse, he deceives the entire world. This expands the scope of the narrative. It transforms the battle into something that is not only celestial, but also human. Something there would not make sense if it were only a distant war, because its consequences are felt here, in everyday reality, in decisions, in perceptions, in the way truth is understood. This suggests that the conflict described is not only external, but also internal. And perhaps that is precisely why this image remains so powerful, because it speaks of something that continues to happen, even if in an invisible way. If we continue moving forward in this vision, we perceive that the battle described does not end with the expulsion of the dragon. In fact, it enters a new phase, closer to human experience, more intense, and perhaps more difficult to understand, because now the conflict leaves the heavens and approaches the earth. This completely changes the perspective. What once seemed distant becomes immediate. The text continues describing the action of the dragon after being cast down. He does not disappear. He acts, he pursues, and his main target becomes the woman mentioned in the vision, an equally symbolic figure who had already appeared earlier in the chapter. This woman is described with striking imagery, clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. But who is this woman? Interpretations vary. Some traditions see in her the people of God. Others associate her with Israel. And there are also readings that connect her with Mary, the mother of Jesus. Each of these interpretations reveals a different layer of the text, but all point to something in common. The idea of a people or an origin that gives rise to something essential, because the woman gives birth to a child described as one who will rule with authority. And this detail is not random. It connects this vision with other biblical passages, creating a network of meanings that intertwine. But what happens next intensifies the narrative even more. The child is taken, protected, while the woman flees into the wilderness, a place of isolation, but also of preservation. This suggests that even in the face of threat, there is protection. But that protection does not eliminate the conflict. It only shifts it. The dragon, realizing that he has been defeated in heaven, directs his action toward what is within his reach. And that includes not only the woman, but also her descendants, those who, according to the text, keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony. This further expands the scope of the narrative. The battle is not only between celestial figures, it involves those who are part of this story. It extends. It continues. But here, an important question arises. If the dragon has already been defeated, why does the battle continue? This apparent contradiction is central to understanding the text. The defeat in heaven does not mean the immediate end of influence, but a limitation, a loss of position, a change of scenario. And this can be interpreted in different ways. Some see in it a victory already achieved, but not yet fully manifested. Others understand it as an ongoing process, where the final outcome is still to come. And there are also readings that interpret this dynamic as part of the human condition itself, a conflict between what has already been revealed and what still needs to be understood. Perhaps you are perceiving that this battle cannot be reduced to a single meaning. It operates on multiple levels: historical, theological, symbolic, and even psychological, because, ultimately, the text speaks of confrontation, of opposition, of resistance, and of transformation. But there is one final detail that deserves attention. The text mentions that the dragon acts with great fury because he knows that his time is short. This information completely changes the tone of the narrative. It is not only an undefined conflict, but something that has a limit, urgency, direction. And this raises an inevitable question. What does that time mean? Is it literal, symbolic, or a way of expressing the intensity of the moment? Perhaps the answer is not in choosing a single option, but in understanding that the text operates in multiple dimensions at the same time, and perhaps that is precisely what gives it its strength. If we move into a deeper layer, we perceive that Revelation does not only describe a battle, it organizes a way of seeing reality, a structure of interpretation, where invisible forces influence visible events, and where what happens in the spiritual realm directly impacts human experience. But this leads us to a delicate question. To what extent should this battle be understood as something external? And to what extent does it reflect internal processes? Some mystical interpretations suggest that the figure of the dragon represents more than a being. It may symbolize a set of forces that distort perception, deception, illusion, identification with what is not essential. In this sense, the battle described can be understood as a conflict between clarity and confusion, between awareness and conditioning. Michael, in this context, would not be only a celestial warrior, but the expression of a higher order, a force that restores balance, that separates what is true from what is illusory. This reading does not negate traditional interpretations, but expands the field of understanding. It allows the text to be seen not only as prophecy, but as reflection. But it is important to remain cautious. Revelation itself does not explain its images directly. It presents symbols and then allows the reader to participate in the process of interpretation. This requires attention and also humility before the text. Another relevant aspect is the repetition of patterns throughout the scriptures. The idea of conflict between opposing forces is not exclusive to Revelation. It appears in different forms throughout biblical tradition, but here it reaches a maximum level of intensity, a final synthesis, a moment where accumulated tensions seem to converge. And perhaps that is why this vision remains so impactful. It does not offer only a narrative, but a powerful, symbolic structure that can be applied to different contexts: historical, spiritual, and even existential. But there is something that cannot be ignored. The text does not end with the battle. It points to something more, toward an outcome, toward a restoration, even if it is not immediately described. This suggests that the conflict has a purpose, or at least a direction. It is not only destruction, but part of a greater process. And that completely changes the way we interpret the narrative, because the battle ceases to be an isolated event and becomes part of a broader story, a story that is still unfolding. And perhaps that is precisely what makes this passage so relevant. It does not speak only of a distant time, but of something that continues to happen, in different forms, in different contexts, but with the same fundamental structure: conflict, choice, transformation. And perhaps, in the end, the most important question is not about the dragon, nor about Michael, but about what this battle reveals, about how we perceive reality, and about how we face what opposes truth. Because, in some way, this battle does not occur only in heaven. It also occurs within us. The history of humanity is a journey filled with discoveries, enigmas, and mysteries. Some have been understood. Others still challenge our understanding. And it is precisely in these mysteries that we find the most fascinating questions. Subscribe to the channel and continue exploring the secrets of history, because some secrets of history are still waiting to be revealed.